Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and I'm here to tell you about the... That is an earring falling out of my ear. Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and I'm here to tell you about the best and worst books I read in 2018 statistically by month. Now I give that caveat because what I'm going to do is go back through all the months in 2018 and talk about the book I liked the least that month and the book I liked the most. I know to some people it makes more logical sense to list your books in order of how much you enjoyed them as opposed to going back month by month, but I read 237 books this year and I'm just not willing to do that. So although this might not be a 100% accurate representation of the books I liked absolutely least and absolutely most, it's pretty close. Plus it's just a fun way to go back through the year and remember some books I might have forgot about. I brought up the stats from each of my months but haven't looked at them yet, so let's do that together. In January, I read 18 books and the one I liked the least was Into the Wild Nerd Yonder. This one I gave a 2.5, so it wasn't a terrible, it wasn't a DNF, and I know there's going to be some DNFs on this list. And I read this because I like nerdy fandom books and I was looking for more of them. From what I can remember of this book, it definitely had a nerdy fandom element, but it just wasn't the best. None of the elements really stuck out as something I really super enjoyed. Also, if I remember correctly, the protagonist kind of treated the geeks that she was hanging out with as though they were less than, which is just not what I want to see. The best book I read that month, which will make Chelsea Darling really happy if she happens to watch this video, was The Hating Game. After watching Chelsea talk about it for months and watching her reread it like 5 times in 2017, I finally picked it up and I also really enjoyed it. It was actually the only 5-star book I read that month. This one is a cute, sexy contemporary between these two people that work in the same office. Their companies have merged and basically they had the same job and they're kind of competing to have that one job out of the two. But also there is sexual tension and it's a hate to love type of thing. It was good. Moving on to February. In February, apparently, I read 21 books and DNF'd 1 book, so here's our first DNF. Let's find out what it was. I figured this one would come up pretty quickly. It's The Natural Way of Things by Charlotte Wood. I really didn't enjoy trying to read this book. I tried really hard to finish it because I had seen many people really enjoyed it, but I was not one of those people. This book is about a group of Australian women who find themselves rounded up and stranded in the desert and they don't know why they're there, but when they look around they realize that all of them have been involved in sex scandals. They kind of figure maybe that's why they're there. I did not stick around long enough to find out if they ever escape. I think I made it to about page 125 and gave up because I just wasn't enjoying the writing, and even the mystery of why they're there wasn't enough to keep me there. Going through my notes, this was a month where I did a reread of 2 books I absolutely love, so I guess I'll mention them here, but I'm trying to keep this to books that I read in 2018 for the first time and not as rereads. The 2 books that I absolutely love that I reread this month were Words in Deep Blue by Kath Crawley and Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. Absolutely love these books, still absolutely love these books, definitely check them out. The highest rated book in February that wasn't a reread though was Dress Codes for Small Towns by Courtney Stevens. This one is about a group of friends called the Hexagon and there's queer elements to it and it's just them living a small town life, discovering themselves. I really enjoyed it. It looks like March was probably the month where I read the least amount of books because I only read 12 books in March. Ooh, wow, and this is the part we're doing by month instead of figuring out what my very bottom star ratings were and what my very top star ratings were, is gonna get a little contentious because this was a 3-star read and I definitely had some 1 and 2 and 2.5 star reads throughout the year, so this is a little bit awkward, but it looks like the book I enjoyed the least in March was A Kindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon. There were definitely aspects to this book I enjoyed. I enjoyed the gendered aspects of it, but what I really didn't enjoy and I couldn't get myself past was the concept of slavery in space and this advanced civilization where it has reverted back to being super racist, and it's just not a thing I really enjoyed. And I think that advanced civilization that has regressed in social politics trope is why it made the bottom of my list that month. The top of my list that month was Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. I had never read anything by her and I really enjoyed this book. It's about this girl that goes off to a boarding school and about 50 years previous there was a murder there that hasn't been solved yet. And this is the start of a series, so obviously all of the mysteries haven't come to light yet, but I'm excited to see that when it finally happens, whenever that finally happens. In April, I read 15 books, and the one I liked the least was The High School Life of a Fudanchi. This is a manga about a man who is a Fudanchi, which is a person who loves male-male partnerships in mangas. This is usually reserved for girls, so it's more so about his struggle to buy these comics that are typically for girls. And although I thought this was going to have some positive things to say about gender, it really fell flat for me. And happy birthday to me in April, because my favorite book that month was the favorite book of the year, and that's The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I am sure you have heard about this book before. I have talked about this book several times before, as have many other people on booktube. If you're new to my channel or you're new to booktube, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is about a journalist who goes to interview an aging starlet who says, "I'm going to give you my life story." She's very well known for having had 7 husbands, so the journalist starts out with, "Who was the love of your life?" And it wasn't one of those husbands. This was absolutely beautifully written. Like I said, it was my favorite book of the entire year, and I can see myself rereading and rereading and rereading this one. This is actually the book I keep next to my bed to pick up and just read a chapter or two when I'm between books. In May, I read 20 books, and the one I liked the least was Black Coffee by Agatha Christie. This one is a play. I'm not the biggest Agatha Christie fan, but my friend Peter and I used to have this tradition where we would meet in the airport on the way to VidCon and discuss a book. We did it 2 years ago. We were supposed to do it this year, and he totally forgot we were reading another Agatha Christie and just didn't read it, so we didn't do it. The reason why we picked this one is it features a library. He, up until recently, has been studying library sciences, and he actually has a channel called Stacks and Facts all about library science, which you should totally go subscribe to because it's amazing. Anyway, because of when this was written, there's sexism, there's racism, I'm just not here for it. The book I liked the most in May was The Brightsiders by Jen Wilde. This is queer AF, and I loved it. This one is about a band called the Brightsiders, and more specifically the drummer Emmy King. She is kind of that child star who's going down a terrible path. Her parents weren't great at being parents, so she kind of has divorced from them, but because she's under the age of 18, she can't technically use her piles of money to buy her own house. So she's been living in hotels, they've been trashed because of parties, there are issues going on, and she needs to get her shit together. Also, she's bi, and she's thinking about coming out to her fans about it. I adored this book just like I adore everything I've ever seen by Jen Wilde, and I cannot wait for her next book to come out next year. It's called Going Off Script, and I'm super excited about it. In June, I read 22 books, and the one I liked the least was Frankenstein in Baghdad, which got a 2.5 from me. This was a novel in translation, and it's kind of self-explanatory. It was a retelling of Frankenstein, but it was set in war-torn Baghdad, and the concept was really interesting, but I really didn't enjoy how it was executed. There were way too many characters, and only a couple of them were female, and one was like that sex bomb character who might as well just be a lamp, because she brought nothing to the story besides the author getting to have masturbatory fantasies about her. And when I first heard about this book, it seemed that the body parts were being put together as kind of a political protest, but that wasn't the case, and it wasn't really explained why the person doing this was doing it, and it just was not for me. The best book I read that month was American Kingpin by Nick Bolton. This is narrative nonfiction, and it is so good. This was actually a recommendation I got from Dylan Marin at PodCon the previous year, and he did not disappoint me. Unbeknownst to me, because I don't know anything about the drug trade or how to buy drugs online, there used to be a website called the Silk Road where you could buy drugs online. This is a story about the man who created that website. The author went into so much detail in his research that he looked up what the weather was doing on certain days, so he could describe what the weather was when his protagonist was off doing his website building and all of this stuff, and it was just so well put together. If you like nonfiction, especially narrative nonfiction, this is fantastic. In July, I read 26 books, and the one I liked the least was called Walt, which I believe is by Russell Wagersky. This one I read for the Read-A-thon, which is still a wonderful name for a read-a-thon about Canadian authors. This one is about a man who by day stocks the shelves at a grocery store and by night stalks people. This was set in Newfoundland and there were some decent elements, but obviously overall it just didn't fit with me. My favorite book that month was What If It's Us by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera. I got an E-arc. I absolutely loved it. I read it during the 24 and 48. Now that it's out in the world, I'm so glad that other people can read it too and talk about it. The protagonists were adorable. I love that each of them had own voices elements from the authors that created them. This book is about two boys that have a meet cute that gets interrupted and then they can't get each other out of their minds, and when they find each other again, they keep going through a series of do-overs on first dates. I remember getting very scared at about the 70% mark because I didn't know if this was just going to end up super sad because Adam Silvera, but I ended up being very satisfied with the ending. In August, I read 20 books and DNF'd one book, which would have been Billy Budd. Now, I made a whole video about how classics are just not for me, and that is okay, which I will link in places. I picked this one up for a readathon where you had to read something that is outside of your comfort zone. Classics are not a thing I usually read, so I picked a very short classic. It was only 80 pages, still couldn't get through it. My favorite book in August, however, was I Was Born for This by Alice Oseman. Oh my goodness, this book was great. It had a dual perspective between a fan of a band and a member of that band, and I just really enjoyed all of the commentary on celebrity culture and idolizing people, and just because you idolize a musician doesn't mean you want to sleep with that musician. Although some people definitely do, and that is why it's a widespread stereotype. This one had a lot to say about fandom culture, and I just love everything I have ever read by Alice Oseman. In September, I read 16 books and DNF'd one book, which was A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. So yeah, I DNF'd this one. It got 1 star. This book I tried to read for my local book club, and it was put forward by somebody who had read it when they were a kid and they really enjoyed it, and when we got to book club, she went, yeah, that was not as good as I remember. My biggest problem with this book was it seemed to be written in such a way where each chapter could have been its own book, because a lot happened, but the way it was written was, and then he did this, and then he did this, and then he did this, which is just not very entertaining to read. Also, where are my ladies at? There was a lack of female characters, and I think the one we got was not great. Again, there could have been more down the line, but I DNF'd it. Someone at work recently read the series and said it only started getting good on book 4 out of 5, maybe 5 out of 5, and I'm just not willing to read that many books to get to the good one. My best book of September was Anger is a Gift by Marco Shira. This one broke my heart a few different times. Firstly, my battery died. Secondly, this cast is extremely queer. Most of the side characters are queer. The main character is a queer boy who has panic attacks, and he meets a cute boy on the train right before he has a panic attack. Almost everybody is a person of color. There are different variations on the queer community. Just loved it. Made me cry so many tears. In October, I read 20 books and DNF'd 2. Let's find out what both of them were, shall we? The first one was American Psycho. Really did not enjoy trying to read this. I understand it's satire. I get that. It was just too much for me. This was very overdone satire about the yuppie culture of the 1990s. You couldn't get through a paragraph without it name dropping like 5 brands, and I just couldn't read it. I couldn't even get to the psycho parts. All I got was yuppie, 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 yuppie. I just wanted to get to the murders, not gonna lie. In case you're wondering, the other thing I DNF'd was The Body by Stephen King. I tried to read both of these for the same challenge for a readathon and just couldn't get through them. There was a section in The Body where the main character just did a flash forward to when he was in college and then just info dumped a story he writes in college, which has nothing to do with the plot of this story. I can only assume that author-narrator thing works out better in the movie Stand By Me, but I haven't seen it yet, so if I ever do, I'll let you know. The book I liked the most in October was The Kiss Quotient, which is the least October-y book that I could have picked, but sure. Which is actually a pretty big surprise because my second favorite is something I've been waiting for literal years, which was An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. I feel like you've probably heard about both of these books. If you haven't, go check out my October wrap-up because I gush about both of them so hard. In November, I read 25 books. The one I liked the least was V for Vendetta. This graphic novel is incredibly difficult to follow because all of the characters look the same. Unless you're literally V or one of the women, all of the dudes are the same person and it's hard to follow the plot. The best book of November though, hands down, was Muse of Nightmares. I really love this duology, Strange the Dreamer, Muse of Nightmares. I love bookish books. This is the epitome of bookish books, but in like 2 700-page tomes. I lift enough books at work, so I actually listen to these as audiobooks because otherwise carrying them around would ruin my back even more so than it's already ruined. I love the writing, I love the characters, I love the magical world it was set in, I just loved everything about it. As for December, I read 25 books, and if you don't want to be spoiled as to what my least favorite and most favorite were, you can pause this and come back to it after you watch my December wrap-up, which will probably be going up the day after this. My least favorite book in December was Fair Play by Tove Jansson. This is a series of vignettes of these two women who live in the same building. It is queer because it's based on her life living with another woman, but because there was nothing really tying these stories together, it just wasn't my cup of tea. Again, it was a 3-star, but it just wasn't my favorite. My favorite, however, was In Other Lands by Sarah Rees Brennan. I loved this. This one is about a boy who goes off to a magical school, but he is a pacifist, and it's basically a very war-based school, and it plays with gender roles, and it plays with society, and it made me cry on several occasions, which I was not expecting because the character is such a sarcastic cuss face. I just loved him. And it took the entirety of the 4 years to really realize who he was actually in love with, and I loved everything about it. I'm going to reread it in 2019. It's just going to happen. I absolutely adored this book. And there you have it. There are my best and worst books of 2018. Are there any on the list that you're surprised by? Are there any that you thought I would mention and didn't come up? Let me know about it down in the comments below. This is my goodbye to 2018. This is my hello to 2019, where I will again be setting my Goodreads goal at 100 books, but considering I read 237, I'm sure that'll go over just fine. Other than that, I don't really have many bookish goals. I'm going to continue doing my weekly wrap-ups. I'm going to continue doing my monthly wrap-ups. In January, I'm trying to read my own shelves. I'm doing Read Yo Shelves, which is a challenge that I put together with my friend Stephanie, where there's a bingo board. I will link it in places. But if there are any challenges or any goals that you think I should consider, please let me know down in the comments below, because I would love to know what you want to get out of my channel. In any case, I guess I'll see you next year in 2019. Bye.